to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. We had a last minute substitution coming in here. Randy had an emergency he needed to take care of, and Travis jumped in here at the last minute, so I am stoked. We got Seb, we got Shaun, everybody's here, and I cannot wait to get into this. But before we do, I just want to make sure that everybody is doing the things, liking the show, subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, doing all that good stuff. Get your emails when we go live. Of course, Fridays for the Collective, Wednesdays for the workshop. If you guys have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all about today's show or specifically to any one of the guests, put them in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. And of course, if you have not yet, make sure you're signed up for the reinforcement loop that goes out every week, giving you some information about the show, as well as some brain candy from Shaun, soon to be brain candy from me during the summer, which is going to be a fun time. And then other than that, let's get right into it. Travis, it's been a while since you've been on the show. I don't think we need a rundown for you, but how you been, man? You've been busy.
I've been good. I've been busy, been doing a little bit of traveling, but back on solid ground here. Was pretty stoked. Was chatting with Seb over text here. He's like, hey, what are you doing right now? I said, well, why? He said, well, got a last minute cancellation. Want to jump on? So happy that you guys will have me, and I'm stoked to see if I can bring some value to this conversation.
Always happy to have you here, buddy. You got an open seat, really. Like, you could call me on the day 3 minutes before the show and be like, hey, I'm not doing anything. Can I get on the show? I'd be like, yes, you're here. Well, no problem.
I'll tell you one thing. Every time I'm on this show, when it wraps up, I leave, I'm riding a high. It's always a good group of people. There's always something to think about. So I'm stoked to be here.
Outstanding. Seb, man, it's been a while since we've had you on. No, a couple of days, but how you doing down south?
I'm good, man. Randy, 3 out of 3, bro.
3 to 3.
Let's talk this out, Randy. What's happening here?
It's kind of funny. We were chatting about this earlier, in the fact that it's a bit of a coincidence at this point. One is a happenstance. Two is starting to go like, what?
Randy, there's 2 versions to every story, brher. You gotta talk.
You just know he's on the range right now, cracking rounds down range.
100%. Well, he said he's got something to do with a knee surgery or something like that. So I give him I give him some leeway on that one. But Shaun, how's life out in the mountains?
Yeah, things are good. Had a full morning, but I'm looking forward to this conversation. It is great to have Trav back on, and you know, as he kind of rounded out his opening salvo, he said that when he leaves the show or after we finish the podcast, he's always like upbeat, or he's got that more positive energy. Well, the moment that I saw Trav was on the show, when I joined into this call and I saw him, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a good one. I'm already like elevated from having Trav on, so and that's real. So, you know, the people who show up on the show, it's a bummer that Randy's, loading 9mm magazines right now instead of being here in the podcast. But Trav, I'm grateful to see you.
Yeah, I am as well. And Dan C jumped in here right off the bat. Good morning, gentlemen. I was almost adrift, short and sweet this morning, for honor, for glory, for the ass kickers. So today we're going to be talking about drawing the line, and I want to give you guys a little bit of background as to why I selected this one for today. My boys and I was driving them to school, and we were chatting, and we were talking about bullying, and when people get a little too close or they do things too many times, and being able to draw a line and say, okay, we're done with this now, or this is too much, this is too far. And the statement I made to them is like, sometimes you just got to draw a line. And then I had to correct myself, and I'm like, no, because we're always drawing lines. We draw lines all the time. It just depends on the severity of it. And I was like, sometimes you draw it with a pencil, sometimes you draw it with a sword. And then I was like, that's a great idea for the podcast. Had to write it down immediately. So I want to get your guys' thoughts. Drawing the line, pencil, sword, anything in between, all of what you got. Travis, we'll hit you first.
Oh, wow.
Welcome.
Okay, so who was it? I think it was John Wayne. What did he say? A man must know where his line is and be ready to defend it. So there's the quote for the day. But I got to say, sometimes drawing the line can trap you in a box, and you have to watch what lines you think that are immovable. I forget who the author was, but popular book, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. I think it was called Getting to Yes. And it was talking about how is it that you can maneuver yourself through life or through a negotiation in a way that both parties can win without having that hard line in the sand where it's, okay, well, you want this? Fair enough, but that means we're going to have to move the line over here in order to make that happen. In negotiations, that works well. In areas of moral or integrity, a person should have a very strong understanding of where those lines are for them so that it's just a black and white on or off, yes or no decision when a situation presents itself. Opening thoughts.
I dig it. Seb, opening thoughts? What's your opening salvo?
Mhm. You sent me down the philosophical rabbit hole on this one, on the video you released the other day, which was really good, by the way. The one that spoke about those very concepts. And one of the things that immediately came to mind was, can you even draw a line with a sword? And what kind of sword would that need to be? Some sort of Hattori Enzo on limestone, or excuse me. And so, kind of in line with what Travis was talking about, I equated it almost immediately to commander's intent, mission statement, and mission execution. When you have your mission statement or the principle, the fundamental principle, which is this, that perhaps a strong line can be drawn, and having the adaptability and the flexibility to do whatever it is to either erase, redirect, or connect to another line. So then I started going down the rabbit hole of, if you did draw a line with a sword and it wasn't concrete or in asphalt or whatever surface, hard surface, something immovable, but you needed to make some adjustment to it, keeping in mind the basic principle, could you use a chisel, for example? So say you wanted to prevent water from crossing a certain threshold, and you did a bit of a dig to keep the water inside or to have some sort of drain, but now you wanted to redirect the water somewhere else. Could you take a chisel and chisel a path out of that line? So philosophically, it sent me down this thing where, because we have very hard lines as we grow and as we negotiate this world and this life, and as we change, even our hardest lines tend to morph, at the very least, if they're not completely sort of do without, so to speak.
Yeah, the funny thing, the reason I used the terminology drawing a line with the sword was that specifically, in those old movies where the guy pulls a sword, draws a line in the sand, and is like, bring it. And it was that clicked in my head. And then I was making the poster, and I'm like, how would you carve something with a sword? That'd be really awkward, and you're trying to it would be pretty difficult. Shaun, what's your first thoughts?
Well, I came in this conversation with really quite a blank slate because I was engaged in something completely different, writing the book. But coincidentally, the book overlaps immensely with this topic. And so the very first things that come to my mind based on what the boys said is, I believe that there's two operating states. You've got your internal state and you've got your external state, your internal world, the external world. And I believe that a pencil exists in both of them. A sword exists in both of them, and you're standing on sand in both of them. And so let me quickly make the case. You can draw a line with a pencil, you can erase it. You can draw a line with a sword, you can't erase it. You can draw a line in the sand, and it'll shift by the next day. And so the sand itself can shift, and you can be aware of it or not. But the pencil and the sword you will be aware of because you're the one who's creating it. So in a sense, you have personal agency with the pencil and with the sword. But with the sand, you have no agency. So it's not just a matter of who you are and how you drive your life, but it's where you put yourself in life. So as an example, if I'm with my friends, let's say I'm at Seb's place. The sand isn't shifting. It isn't. Because he's got a very stable environment. He's a very stable individual. Both of us together are extremely stable. And the reality is that there is no sand in our relationship. Maybe at the start of our relationship there was sand, but now there isn't. We're on stable footing. But that doesn't mean that the pencil and the sword still doesn't exist for both of us internally and externally. Now, I guess maybe the greater question is, if we're looking at this from an individual perspective, how we run our lives, that is one conversation. But another conversation is how Seb and I together share a pencil or share a sword, or how we both stand next to each other, both with pencils and both with swords, and are they aligned or not? And so there's many ways to kind of play with this idea, but those are my first thoughts.
I'm liking where this is going already. I just want to remind anybody watching, make sure if you guys have questions, put them up in the comment section. We'll talk them through. Travis, I'm going to go around the circle again. Any other thoughts now that we've gone around the table?
No, I think Shaun and Seb basically covered what I'm thinking about. Not to get trapped in this idea of this is my line and I can never cross it, or it can never be crossed. In certain situations, you have to be adaptive to the reasoning behind the line that you've drawn, because oftentimes people get, like I was mentioning earlier, boxed into a mindset based on their preconceived ideas as to what they could or couldn't do. And that should be derived from what the intention is behind drawing that line to begin with. And if you lose sight of what that intention is, you can find yourself in trouble.
Absolutely. Seb, any other thoughts?
Not really. Exactly the same. Fundamental, like what were you doing it for fundamentally? And oftentimes we fall in love with how we're doing it rather than what we're doing. And I think just having the ability to refocus on what it is that we were doing it for to begin with really helps us sort of open up our options.
So, well, then let me ask you guys this, because one of my general opening questions was, what changes in us when we decide we're going to draw a line? Like, what is it that we're doing? For Shaun's example, in the internal world, when we actually set that boundary, when we say either this enough is enough, or I want to get here, or whatever that is, what changes internally? I'm going to hit Shaun first. I saw the nod.
Well, you saw the smirk. And the smirk is because, there's a question before that. Do you even know that you're doing it or not? And so, we're always making decisions. It's whether we're aware of that we're making those decisions. They're either offloaded or they're aware. And even if you are aware of making your decisions, then maybe you're not fully present as you're aware that you're making those decisions. And therefore, maybe that decision was a 6 out of 10 in awareness, or in an intention, or in a, this means something. And so that's how we go through our day, I believe, all of us. We make decisions, and not every single decision is 100% our best effort, is 100% thought through. And there's a reason for that, because there's efficiencies and effectiveness aspects that have to come into play. There is time constraints. There is pressure. There are all sorts of variables that are in play every single second of your life to make this line appear to be many things in that moment. And it depends on what variable you lock into. So if someone hits you with 5 variables, you're going to cherry pick the one that you feel is important to you, whereas the person next to you might choose another variable. That will create 2 different lines. And then you'd mentioned lines in the sand. And that's always the phrase that people throw out. I'm just going to draw my line in the sand, and I am not going to cross that, and you're not going to cross that. That is a solid line, but it isn't. The moment that you draw that line in the sand, it is shifting. And so those are my first thoughts, Chance, to your question. There's moments before this question, if you will.
I dig it. Trav, I see you take notes. What do you got?
Nothing fleshed out, unfortunately, but jotting down some basic notes on. So you gave the example of your son, and where's that line if you're at school and if there's bullying happening, and at what point do you stand up for yourself, right? And a person can say, okay, well, if a person hits me, that's my line, then I'm going to hit back. Or if a person threatens to hit me, okay, the fight's on, I'm going to hit back. Or if I feel, and you got all these different variables that a person can start saying, well, if this, then that. And as Shaun was saying, we make decisions every single day, but based on what? Typically, we develop heuristics. We've developed this happened before, this is what I did, this is my easy answer. And we don't really think these things through because we know how to get to the end state without having to go through all of the steps in there. The issue is, where are these, and if we're going to say lines that we're coming up from, where are they coming from? Are we making them ourselves, and based on what? Are they coming in to us? And I see in a societal way how easy it is to manipulate the masses with social media, how easy it is with AI to be able to manipulate people, and people start sub-opting or abrogating control for their own thinking process to a third party, whether that's Google, AI, social media, whatever the current trend is going to be. And so I think one thing that the collective does is it helps reinforce epistemic discretion, which is something that I think is going to be in a high priority as we move forward, as we kind of opt out our own thinking to large learning models that can help shortcut these things for us. Is, okay, if this, then that, it says this, why? So if we can understand the why behind why we're making these decisions, or why we're setting these different lines, and make sure they're true to us, if we can define all of that, then have the bravery to be able to stand up for those decisions, because I think that's one thing as we move forward that's going to be in short supply, because everyone's going to lean on the easy answer that comes up through the masses, through whatever's fed to them.
You bring up an interesting point. It just clicked in my head, is that you're right. Lots of people draw lines all the time. We make decisions all the time. And Shaun, you're right as well in the fact that a lot of people don't think about those decisions. They just go off of their rote dogmatic approach to whatever they've been doing through their life. But you brought up a point, Travis, is that every time you draw a line, you need to be able to be ready to defend it. That was the whole point of drawing the line in the sand, was that if you cross this, now you got to deal with me. And I heard something a while back. It was online. It was talking about that if you can't defend a position with your life, then it's not a position. It is a suggestion, or it's a thought. Like, you're not setting a boundary. You're just suggesting that their boundary is there. And I know that's an extreme case, but
that is every second of the day defending your life, right?
Then exactly. Then
you're using that example of drawing a line in the sand like there's an invading army about to cross this imaginary line, in your neighborhood, where all of a sudden you're fighting all the zombies. But man, every second of your life, you're defending a line. And it's a line that you either understand or don't. And if you think you understand it, I'll challenge anyone, including myself, that I need to spend the rest of the day thinking even more deeply about that line and its outcomes and its sort of collateral damage to some degree. And so, the line in the sand should be an every second of your life line in the sand. But the statement, I'm going to draw a line in the sand, feels like it should be epic. It should be magnificent. It should be something that people talk about hundreds of years from now, but it isn't. What people will talk about is how well you lived your life every second of the day, So the line in the sand is something that you have to defend, but it isn't like up on the castle moat wall, like a chivalrous moment with flags flapping in the background. It is the inane, it is the invisible, it is the silent acts every single second of your life that is the line in the sand.
I don't know about you, but like, decisions that I make have flags flapping on the background all the time. So, but that's just me. A couple comments, and then I'm going to hit Seb on this one. Sky Sonia jumped in here and says, she says, the fantastic panel. We'll catch up later. Good to see you. Dan C says, nothing in the world grows without something breaking. Muscle fibers tear, creating bigger muscles. Tree fibers tear, creating bigger trees. Our core value fibers tear, and we evolve. It's a part of life. This is interesting. Now, although I think that our core values, as they shift, I think they can become more entrenched, or they can become more frivolous at times too. So it, depending on where you go with that. Seb, I'm going to come to you. What are your thoughts?
I don't know, man. I got lots of thoughts. I'll address a few things, not super in depth, but one of the things that was interesting that you said earlier is, based on our experiences, the fact that we're unhealed, circumstances in our life, growth, introspection, conscious versus subconscious processes, all realms of the human experience involved in this one thing that we call risk assessment. and we conduct that at every opportunity that we can. The problem with risk assessment isn't to conduct risk assessment, is some of the things that we inject within our risk assessment and some of the things that we negate to consider in the risk assessment. And so, for example, if my experience leads me to act out of ego and pride, and my line in the sand, as Shaun alluded to, is a prideful process, now meant to, posture, so to speak. Now I just pinned myself in a corner and I may have to do something categoric or something serious in order to keep face, essentially, right? So now my very risk assessment process is cued by some of my natural propensities, which are to ego and pride, for example. And then that creates another set of issue or proxy issues, would be some things such as blind spots, for example. And one thing that came to mind somehow, and I'm not sure of the historical accuracy of this, so excuse me if it's not exactly correct, but didn't Genghis Khan go around the Great Wall of China? Like, I believe that that's what happened, right? They build this incredible structure to keep the Mongols out of, and they just went around it because it wasn't completely connected. And so now we're looking at the potential for something worse than not having lines in the sand. It's the perception of the safety associated with the perceived line in the sand that we have, without the actual safety piece being in place. And so those are sort of two things that I think we could, throw around for a little bit.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, I was looking at a post this morning. It was a quote from Patton, and he was saying that the Great Wall of China, the Maginot Line, and a couple other, I can't remember, but he was talking about the fact that we should study defenses, because every time you put up a impregnable wall, someone goes around it. Every time. They'll figure out a way to get around it. They'll go over it. They'll go under it. They'll do whatever they need to do. And he said, the quote carries on. He's like, the best and most prolific defense is always offense. And if you are on the offense, then you don't have to defend certain areas, right? So I think it's an interesting way to look at this. Shaun, what do you got?
Yeah, and who am I to correct Patton? But I think he's wrong. I don't think you should build the defensive wall of the century, nor do I think you should have the offensive assault of the century. What you should be is neutral. You should be in a state where you can respond, where you can react in the real time. And so by choosing offense, what you have done is you've written your future. You've decided what you're going to be doing for the next year, generally speaking. But I feel if you're neutral, then you can rapidly evolve to either defense or offense. And I know that's super simplistic, and I know Patton understands this. It's just that big, bold statements like that can lead people down a path of, yeah, you know what, Patton's right. Screw defense. I'm all about the offense. And that's just not correct. And so I do appreciate what you're saying, Chance. It's just that, with nuance, that comment from Patton is a wash for me. So I just want to go back to a couple of things. Trav had mentioned heuristics. Generally speaking, that's super important because it's really an evaluation of the patterns of your life. And as you form the patterns, what you're doing is you're consolidating that pattern into, we'll call it a shortcut. And it's not a shortcut. It is something that you've learned over a long period of time. You've evolved into like a beautiful little process that is tight, actionable, and doesn't cost you a lot, doesn't cost you a lot of cerebral or anything. And you can execute that pattern based on all of the successes that you've had with that pattern over the years. That heuristic allows you to bounce forward in time with less effort. And so patterns are super important as part of this topic. Another thing that was brought up about AI, giving the line away to AI, and that is absolutely true. I've had a number of conversations about this topic over the last few weeks, and it is something that we really need to isolate as a podcast subject rather than mention it in passing. And so please, Chance, make a note for that. We have to get that on as a proper 2-hour-long conversation about where things are going. Now, ironically, and it's great that this panel is together today, because I know at the very least, Trav is going to remember this, because pretty much one of the first podcasts I ever did in my life was with Trav in my kitchen. And I said to Trav way back in the day that kind of one of the reasons that I'm doing this, I want to do this and I don't know how to do it yet, but I see AI off in the distance and I think I know where it's going to go. And I want to get in front of it and I want to defeat what I see coming our direction as a human species. I said I wanted to create humans like us that have identities, have a signature that our friends, our peers, our acquaintances, others can trust as humans. And we can't be replaced by AI because we've already developed this show to some degree. Now, do you remember me saying that, Trav?
Yeah, I do. I remember having an interesting conversation about the Matrix as well.
That's right.
And,
that is correct. That's correct.
I remember it vividly.
Okay, great. And so, I was looking forward into the years. I didn't even think I was going to keep podcasting, but I'd drawn my line in the sand against AI. I've drawn my line against many things in my life, but, most of them were kind of little things, inane things. Like, I'm not going to do the dishes anymore. That didn't work out. But like the big important things in life, that's what this topic is about. It's not about the dishes. It's about the grand, impactful things that you can see in the future that you're drawing the line in the sand for now. So that's my thought on AI. As Trav raised, I just thought I'd better throw that out and we'd better hit it on the podcast. Last thing, Seb had said, risk assessment, what we're doing every single second of our lives is we should be doing risk assessment. And he is right. But for some people out there, risk assessment kind of sounds a bit like, a bit service related or a bit, law enforcement or a bit military or a bit whatever. And that term risk assessment might not work for them. I think it works for me, but it might not work for them. So it's not that I'm trying to put words in Seb's mouth. And I've never really thought of it this way until he put it across the way he did. I just started thinking about people who haven't been in our shoes. And so I changed risk assessment to the reality assessment. And so every single second of your life, you should be assessing reality, the thing that you're actually in right now, this reality that we're all sharing. You should be assessing reality, not risk assessment. It's reality assessment. And so I don't want to stomp all over Seb's risk assessment because, dude, I 100% agree with it. But reality assessment kind of feels right to me a little bit more so than risk assessment. What do you guys think?
I think that's a good thought. I wrote down what is, and I ask myself that question quite regularly: is what is, and that gives me my reality assessment on a pretty regular basis. But again, you have to actively do that. You have to put that into your repertoire, and you have to kind of build it through repetition. Because if you just say it once, like, I'm going to do a reality assessment right now. Okay, everything's good, cool. But to Seb's point, like, we got to do this all the time. We got to ask these questions almost in the background. We got to be playing it constantly in my mind.
Like almost develop a heuristic with it.
Almost like a heuristic setup. Yes, exactly. Travis, what do you got?
Well, there's a lot to be said for people who have that on-off, that switch, if this, then that, for being able to act. There is a very good circumstances, situations where being able to act in the moment is very important. Likewise, thinking and overthinking things is going to be something that can lead to nothing. You just end up in analysis paralysis. So at some point you have to decide, like, how much effort am I going to be putting into thinking about this and seeing where that line's going to be and what the outcome of that might be. I do think for a lot of the basic things in our life, we can have that on-off heuristic. I know that if this comes up, I'm not going to steal. Why? Not because it's going to be difficult, but because that speaks to me and how I'm going to be perceived and what I value in life. And I don't want to be thought of as a thief. So it makes it really easy. I'm not going to do this. That's a simple line that I can draw. However, these lines that get drawn, whatever it's in, sand, stone, even stone can be eroded. And these lines typically don't disappear just like that. They get eroded little by little with these small decisions over time. Well, I guess it's easy. And I mean, my taxes, I'll do this on that. Is that stealing? Not really. And you can people start justifying where that line might be. I think that the most dangerous line possibly is the one that we don't even see. It's not the ones that we're drawing for ourselves right here and now, which we can turn around and say, there's my line, but what's my why behind it? And maybe I should change my perspective. Maybe I made that one out of ego, and I'm going to have to park the ego for a bit, eat a little bit of humble pie, and move forward. There are invisible lines that we might not even realize that are either internally drawn by ourselves based on what we think we can and cannot do, or externally drawn based on what is being fed into us. And I think some of that bleeds back into the AI chat. And if you guys will have me on that one, I'd love to be involved in that AI chat, because I think that would be very interesting, just to even just be the fly on the wall and learn myself. But I think that we should really question a lot of our actions and decisions is where we're moving forward and the why behind that, and see if maybe, like, for example, your son, if this line's crossed, then the fight's on. Well, maybe I don't even need to be in that class. Maybe I can be transferred. Maybe I can put myself into a different area where I don't have to worry about that situation anymore, and I can elevate myself. Maybe I'm just in the wrong, I just got to move myself somewhere else. Maybe I don't have to have that line. So sometimes being too fixated on where that line is doesn't allow us to grow and be in the company of people who might not even consider that a line because they're supporting you.
Interesting. I got a thought on that, but Seb, I want to hit you first. What do you got?
Yeah, just in line with that, I was thinking about, catastrophizing, which is something that we tend to do. It's almost like if something happens inherently, it will be absolutely catastrophic. It's like, okay, calm down. Like there are circumstances where this might be the case, but generally speaking, on the day-to-day, as we are making a risk assessment, my daughter has a 6:30 practice at basketball tomorrow. I can drive the car this way, that way, or the other way. All three have their different set. One road is icy, the other one has snow on it. Like, at the end of the day, we're going 30 down a rural road. So if something happens, I'll be in the ditch for 10 minutes until the tow truck comes out, right? Like, it is nothing about it is catastrophic. And so, see, if I catastrophize it, or if I increase the risk to such a level that everything is catastrophic, then she's not going to practice, because clearly I'm going to stay here and safe in all safety. So the point isn't to emphasize the safety of her and mine. The point is that I'm overinflating the risk. That's the problem. And so the other thing is, I think as we're drawing these lines in the sand, and we tend to go very physical with that for whatever reason, maybe because we're men, I don't know, and it's really kind of interesting, because these lines are all the things. They're emotional. They're all the things, right? And what's interesting is we tend to think, because we're physical beings and because we're physical creatures, we tend to think of consequences as a bypass of the line, or crossing of the line, so to speak, as a physical altercation, or even a metaphorically physical altercation. Somehow it always goes back to that, which is probably very deeply rooted, but that in itself is something that needs looking after. If that line is crossed, what are my non-combative options? What other options do I have to problem solve this that doesn't involve a frontal assault? What are some of the things that I can be doing? And so now you can have lines, and those lines can become a warning line. And for those in the service field, maybe we're talking about a tripwire. I have a tripwire set up so that it goes bang audible when something happens and my line is being crossed, and now I have contingencies. What are they? Is this having a conversation with somebody? Is this, whatever it is? The scenarios are endless, but it's very funny how we, and I say we, I'm guilty as charged. Like, as soon as we talk about line in a sense, somehow it goes towards physicality, which 99% of life is not.
I really like
Chance, can I jump in on that? Because as Seb, just part of Seb jumping in on that particular trajectory, I was scribbling something down that is absolutely in alignment with that, and it's not saying it in any different way, but I wrote it down because it ties directly to your experience, Chance, and you've raised the subject of bullying, drawing a line in the sand, conversation with your sons, etc. But let's hop into the hot tub time machine and go back a couple, 3 years where you, for the very first time, you said, hey, my son's bullying. And I said, okay, let's talk about that because my sons went through that as well. And I went through that as well. And I've got some practical experience that I can hand to you, having raised 2 young sons up into grown men. And so here's my thoughts. And I passed those along to you. We kind of strategized on that, if you recall. And so, my point is not for you to, talk about that conversation. My point is to make this point. Line in the sand was drawn once we initiated that conversation. The line in the sand was the start line. And to Seb's point, what most men, I believe, feel is when they draw the line in the sand, it's like, oh, you'll never cross my line in the sand or it's go time. We're going to get physical. Did you just cross my castle moat wall? Now it's war. That's what we do. But, to step back from that, to be a little more intellectual about it or a little more well-rounded, the line in the sand is the start line that you and I stood on a few years ago when this conversation first started. So you can draw the line in the sand like, oh, it's go time. Or you can draw the line in the sand as to, I recognize this is an issue. We're initiating a response and a solution now, and it may take me weeks, months, or years to get it to where I want to be, but I'm starting now. That is still a line in the sand. And I feel that most people don't cross enough start lines. That's my thought.
I dig it. And interestingly enough, I was thinking along the same lines, was the fact that with my kids, and I'll specifically talk this, I have a 4-step rule now. So, and it's the same 4-step rule we went over, Shaun, and it was somebody's bugging you, you tell them to stop. If they continue, you tell them to stop loud enough for people to hear you, like so that wherever you're around, people can hear. They continue, then you go seek an adult or a teacher, something like that, somebody with a position of authority. And if they don't stop still, you put them on the ground. And you make sure that they stay on the ground. that was my 4-step rule. But the point of that, exactly to what you're saying, Shaun, is that it's not about in that moment. Now I got to run through my procedure. It's the fact that I've prepped the boys weeks in advance. We've talked about it. We've gone through it. I've done role play, done little things like that, so they actually have some experience to be able to call upon in those moments. And it's similar to our escalation of force training, right? When we're overseas, you can go from warning shots to all the way up to deadly force, or you can go from totally calm to deadly force in an instant. But the first step of that isn't recognizing a threat, it's having situational awareness. It's actually being aware of what's happening around you, and having some understanding of the situation. And I'm digging where we're going with this. I'm going to go pass it around. Got a couple comments, and I'm going to pass it around again. Dave Curvin jumped in here. He said, good afternoon, gents. Nothing like getting the old internal thought processor going on a Friday afternoon. Great conversation so far, as always. And he carries on, iteration after iteration, revision after revision. We learn, we improve. The line always changes. And that's a that's a great point. You guys got any thoughts on anything? Seb, I'm going to come right back to you. Any other thoughts on what Shaun or I said?
Yeah, just on what you said there. I mean, that's a really interesting concept, because what do we know happens if your body or your legs outrun your brain? Like you're going to react in a way that isn't necessarily predictable, or isn't necessarily grounded in the right way to be dealing with things, because now you are time compressed and you're having a hard time making decisions that are going to be potentially sensible, maybe even a little bit more thoughtful, so to speak. So front loading your contingencies, right? Like, and again, this sounds very service related and everything, and I don't like these verbiage necessarily, but front loading, what happens, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, what happens if certain things happen? What are some of the options that I have? What are some of the potential consequences associated with every one of these options, and what seems sensible and reasonable, and what is driving these contingencies? You know, if I'm, say for example, if there is some stuff going on with your kids at school, for example, with some of the coaching staff or whatever the case may be, and next thing you know, there is a perceived attack on your child, so to speak, on account of, you know, some politics behind the scene or whatever. It's really easy to go like this, like real quick. You can sit here and head out the door with a tomahawk and something else, and just like head straight into battle. But you have not fact find. You have there's so much that needs to happen. And ultimately, even if you were to go in there with your weapon and do all of the things, I mean this obviously in a metaphorical way, would you gain from that? And would anybody? And what are, you know? And so, not only do you need to front load, and that implies introspecting, and it implies thinking. And you know, I had a conversation with my mother-in-law, who I love dearly. She's this super tough old Serbian lady that just went through walls her entire
And she's
life,
super
right?
nice. She's
Oh,
super
she
cool.
is.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
is.
So she got a few sides to her.
But you know, she looked at me in the car the other day as we were driving, and we were driving, the two of us together. We like to spend our time, so we went for a long drive, and then she's looking at me, and I'm like, "What?" She goes, "You know, when I look at you and Alex, I realize I never really stopped to think about anything in my life." You know, she's, excuse me. She's just telling me how she realizes, by seeing us always questioning and always like thinking or whatever, like that she's gone through life without doing a whole lot of thinking, right? And I think that's an important part of that conversation. I think that we need to allow ourselves that luxury without falling into the other side of that trap. Of course, balance is in all things is preferable. So you don't want to be overthinking everything. You don't want to be underthinking everything. But it's like, am I applying a certain level of discernment to this? You know?
Okay, so let me ask you guys this question then, because I think the finding the appropriate level of, like, being able to discern what the appropriate level of response is a big part of this. And in my mind, you have to do it. Shaun says this all the time. You got to do it wrong a bunch of times before you can do it right. Right? Like, I think it requires us to hit a wall. It requires us to hit a point where we're like, nope, that was not the way I wanted to handle that, and this, now we got to deal with the outcome of it. So where do you find the line? Where do you find that discernment? Shaun, I know you got something. What do you got?
I do. Because, you know, what we're talking about here, I'm going to try to simplify it so that then maybe we can like get back to complexity perhaps. But, you know, when you draw a line in the sand, you know what you're really doing? You're drawing your identity. That's it. Like, you can, as Seb said, maybe it's men, I don't know, but you know, something goes sideways at the at some location, and it's your kids that are involved, and like right away, one of the options that you reach for is like pretty limited. It is not all your suite of options. You go straight to whook, let's go sort that out. Obviously, that's not the right way to go about life. So then, if the line in the sand is you using your identity, like who you totally are, rather than some limited selections on a shelf that you reach up and grab, that is not you. The line is you. The line isn't a singular thing, a singular option, one variable out of a million that you're made up of. And so I feel like, again, perhaps this is particularly men, when we draw a line in the sand, we do it with limited choices. That line represents just a few things that I'm not going to say we arbitrarily chose off our shelf of tools, but we didn't choose ourselves. We chose a thing. We chose a simple solution rather than applying our entire self against the problem. And so when you put your identity on the line, the trick with that is you got to know who you are. You can't be rushing to the high school, like speeding down the highway to sort out the school bully, if you don't know who you are. If you're more confused than the school bully, how does that work out? And so, as a person who is there to perhaps, control a situation or lead a situation or guide a situation or whatever the case is, if you're showing up as a shell of a man, you're more often than not, I feel, doing more damage than good. And so, if the shell is the line, what are you putting into that shell? You should be pouring your entire identity into that line, not just a cherry-picked, irrational, perhaps, knee-jerk reaction as you speed down the highway.
To your point, I had this image in my head of somebody drawing a line in the sand, and it, like you're saying, it is usually in that moment, right? There's no pre-thought, preconception, pre-development of where that line is. They just kind of reach it and they go, "Whoa, someone crossed the line," without having any of the forethought to understand where that line is. Because in reality, I think what we want to do is draw a line and then take like 10 or 15 steps in front of it, and then we can start working our way back to where the line actually is, rather than all of a sudden it's just there. Yeah, Travis, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I like the fact that we're talking about being introspective, about neutrality, or approaching these things analytically, as opposed to this is my line, this is where it's at. I like what Shaun's bringing up about people placing their identity in these lines, because that's what the process is. They're saying, if this happens, what will I do? Who am I as a person, and what would my response be? I was raised in a very physical environment. And when I had kids, I have to analyze, how am I going to deal with my kids? If they act up or they do something, at what steps? Like, is there a line that's going to be crossed where I smack them? If they don't respond to that, am I going to punch them? If that doesn't work, do I choke them? Like, at what point does that line go to? And as I play that mental role play forward, I say, well, maybe we don't even start down that road. That's not a road I want to go down to, but looking at delineating these lines allowed me to say, I don't need to lay a hand. There's another way we can approach these situations and raise my kids into confident, mature adults. So analytically looking at these lines, as opposed to being knee-jerk, they did this, now here's what I know. This is how I was raised. Here's how I know how to respond. Taking that line drawing process was very helpful for me. And it's kind of like having a business plan. I know some people have said, how heartless are you to have this plan in place for your family, for your marriage, for your kids? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, why wouldn't I have a plan in place? Why wouldn't I have something that I'm looking forward for them or for myself or everybody else? Like, how heartless of a person are you to not put that time in to have some sort of a plan? A business plan is fantastic to go to a bank and get a loan. A business plan is a fantastic starting place to get people moving forward. But the second the business starts, you're back into analytical, neutral. Is this working? Iterations, and how do we make this work? Because I don't know any business plan that's been solid and just works on forward. The second the rubber hits the road, things start to change. But that line drawing process allows you to select the identity that you're comfortable with, that you want to move forward with.
What do you got, Shaun?
So, yeah, just very quickly. So then using your business example, no business survives if they keep morphing their business identity. And so on day one, you got to know what your business is, or who you are as a business person, or what you're trying to deliver to the universe, as it were. And so the business is your identity. Your identity shouldn't be malleable on that line. You should know who you are, and you should know what you want to be in the future. And that gap between who you are now and what you're going to be in the future, or what you want to be in the future, that's where you get to wend and wind your way towards it, and iteratively and failure-based, and all of the lessons that you need to learn to get to the point they've already identified. Well, that is life. But if you're in the game of reality assessment, then you will adjust accordingly in the real time. And so I love the idea of a business plan for your family. I love the idea of identifying you as your own business identity as a human being. And if you can run a good business, you can run a good life. But a lot of businesses fail. And they fail in the first 2 to 3 years. And it's not because someone didn't have good intentions when they had their business idea. And it's sometimes not even related to resources. Maybe they had enough money, maybe they had enough staff, maybe they had enough parts and tools and all the widgets. But it still fails in 2 to 3 years. And it's been my experience, having been in businesses and observing quite a few businesses, that a business can have everything that it needs to be successful decades down the road with massive growth, but they lose sight of who they are as a business, or they lose sight of their identity. And once that shift away from their central core of who they were when they started on the start line, if it shifts so drastically that they feel like they're not the same person, that's a problem. The other bleed is passion. On day one, the first business, super exciting. I'm going to pour myself into this. 2 years later, burned out, never does business again. There's a lot of parallels to life there.
A lot of parallels. Seb, you got any thoughts?
I don't know. I'm pretty limited in thoughts, but I'll talk about a few things that speaks to a little bit of what was discussed by both Travis and Shaun there. So one of the things that I was thinking about was the self-limiting application of lines. You know, sometimes it essentially, as Shaun alluded to, I'm gonna set my entire identity on that line. By the time they cross that line, they will know who I am. You know, this sort of ego-filled sort of sometimes even subconscious process that we have. And so it had me toying with the fact that the line seems more like an end to self-regulation in a lot of times, you know. Let me set an end time to my self-regulation, because after that, who knows what's going to happen? It's anybody's guess, you know. And again, this isn't the right way to address regular relationship with anybody, good, bad, or otherwise, because we're all broken, we're all walking around wounded, we all have our own stories, we all have our own problems. And I think that it really lacks compassion, right? It just is simply very combative, is what I will call it, and not necessarily in the physical way. So now it brings me to a second piece, which is there a way to create angles? Is there a way to create distance? Can I get off the beach, as Travis said earlier? And all of these things are context driven. And so that's not to be forgotten. You know, what is the context and what's changed and what now? Because even in the concept of professional risk assessment, where people do this for a living, it is incredibly difficult to see them pick up the little subtleties that change everything. You know, and eventually what happens is people tend to fall in love with their own plan. And if you fall in love with your own plan, that relates directly to the business aspect. You may have forgotten what fundamentally you started this for, but now there is some proxy benefits to this business, maybe money, maybe worldly appeal, maybe not, you know, notoriety, or whatever it is that you are now sort of channeling in, because those are appeal of the gain, and now you have forgotten what you were doing it in the first place. And we can name countless companies that have done that. You know, they had a very successful whatever it was, and they started heading in all these different directions, which completely took away from what their fundamental tenet was, and they just drove themselves into the ground. And so I think that all of those things are incredibly important. When it comes to, and this is my challenge to myself and to others, you know, when a situation occurs and we're looking at it from a perspective of reality assessment or risk assessment, whatever you want to call it, and we are weighing the pros and cons and what our response is going to be like, we need to be challenging ourselves on that. We can't just be thinking that somehow we come up with the best solutions, because that is massively overinflating our ability to deal with conflict in the real time, especially if emotions are involved. And we were talking about kids earlier. Those are all situations that are extremely volatile. As soon as you start engaging these things, and it's very difficult to remain detached and engaged, if that makes any sense. And so, you know, a challenge for me is always, is this the the way that I would anticipate somebody that's a balanced individual, that's a loving human being, that's somebody that is capable of humility, of introspection, of all those things. And I don't care what framework you use to achieve that. I have my own. You pick your own, right? But is this going to be reflective of what it is that I say I am, or that I'm engaged in, or that I believe in? And if it isn't, and there's none of those guiding principles, then something may need to change. I need to find a reason to be the best version of myself, instead of finding ways to not have to, so to speak,
Mm. I like the idea of seeking the ideal in every situation, but that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work for many people to be able to get to a point where they can stop themselves and ask those questions in moments of stress, because that takes a long time. What do you got, Shaun? Got something? Line in the sand?
Which line did you see in your mind when you started this conversation?
The horizontal one.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'd put money on that for 99.7% of the population. The line in the sand is the horizontal line. That's what we all do. But to see the world differently, you've got to think differently. And so the line in the sand that moves away from you on the vertical is still a line in the sand, is it not?
Indeed it is.
And so what does that mean to you guys then?
Seb, I'm going to hit you first because I know you had a thought. So I'm going to come right back to you.
Whatever I had in my head just evaporated, which is not unusual. I have one brain cell left, and
You want
it's
me to come back
going
to you
around
then?
going, can I get more? No. I mean, I'll jump on that. I mean, the first thing that came to mind, of course, was now we have a lateral line, and now I can do other things, but now it opens up, for whatever reason, every time you think of a horizontal line in front of you, don't you also think that maybe you have a limit to how far back you can go? Because I'm self-limiting that way too, which is an interesting prospect. So I can't address specifically what that line makes me think of, but what it did do is it made me think about, why did I have a wall behind me when a line was drawn in front of me? Like, this is what happens subconsciously. And not only have I seen a line in the sand, but I've also seen a situation where my inability to tactically reposition is going to be limited, And so, anyways, that's all I got with that.
I dig it. Trav, what do you got?
Yeah, well, I like the idea of how do you think differently. And that harkens back to a conversation we were having right before we pressed record about chopping blueberries and huckleberries and grains of rice. And Shaun's like, well, I think Seb's like, well, how do you even see if you're chopping this grain of rice? And Shaun says, well, what if you just threw a whole handful of rice up? You're bound to get one of them, right? And just a different way of looking at a situation. That was the first thing that I thought of too. I was throw a whole bunch up and sure, you're going to get something. But you find you can change. How do you think about it differently is by putting yourself in rooms with people who think about things differently from you, by not always finding yourself in the echo chamber in your social media, by intentionally going out and putting yourself in difficult places and being neutral and listening to different ideas and different ways of looking at things, and then saying, does this work for me or does it not work for me? Like, I know nothing about day trading, but I guarantee you that if I sat for lunch every day for a week with a bunch of day traders, I'd pick up a thing or two, and maybe I might even try doing day trading. I might learn a little bit. So if there's places like the Collective where people can sit with other people who want to think about these issues, who you value as doing things in a way that you would like to see yourself doing it, I think that's probably the fastest hack to being able to, how do we look at these things differently? Just change your environment. Start hanging around with the people who are doing things in the way that you'd like to see it done, and bring whatever value you can to that group as well.
I really like that. I have a few specific people on my social media that I follow that I can't stand. I don't agree with them, and I there's been a couple of times though where I've seen a post of theirs and I've had to rethink my own positions on the matter of just like, well, they bring up a good point. Okay, let me think about that for a while. And it was Shaun that got me started on that, because my social media was very selective, as it was. I was in a, especially at the very beginning of the collective, I had a tight circle of other veterans who were of similar minds, who were doing the similar things, and it was Shaun that was like, yeah, you got to kind of expand. You got to find people that you don't really agree with and things like that. And now I'd say I'm still probably like 90 to 10 in terms of percentage wise, as to like people that I like and want to hear from and people I don't. But it does hit me quite often that the ability to not only sit in rooms with people, there's a great Instagram thing going on called the Enemies Project. I don't know if you guys have seen that at all. You should look it up. It's getting two people from the opposite sides of viewpoints and putting them in the same room together to have a discussion, and then he mediates it through the thing. Great little show. And what I really enjoy about that is that it takes the effort beforehand from each of those people from either side of whatever the decision is to agree to sit down in a room with someone that they're going to like completely disagree with to begin with. And so it's a great example of where prior there was a line, and then having someone actually like hand you the opportunity. Hey, do you want to step across this line and have a discussion about it? And to your point, Shaun, the vertical line is that's where I see that ability, is the mediator or the facilitator, the person that can kind of stand on the fence, the neutral party can stand there and say, okay, well, now I'm going to invite you to come step up the line and we can actually discuss this. We can kind of come at it from different realms. So to answer your question, Shaun, that's what I see as that vertical line. It becomes the facilitator.
Well, that's fascinating, because I'd never really considered that angle of you standing on the fence, as it were, observing like two neighbors talking. I just didn't see that in my mind. But you know what that then becomes? You're now standing on your horizontal line with two vertical parties. And so just an interesting thought. I hadn't really looked at it in that way. So that's kind of cool. Something that we're kind of talking about right now, this realization that in order to kind of think outside of the box, you got to get out of your little box. Just before we came into this live chat, I had put up an Instagram post. I don't know if any of you guys saw it, but it was only just several minutes before we went live. And because all this morning, like for several hours prior to this, I've just got a few, like maybe 3-4 more days of final polishing on the book that Seb and I are engaged with, called The High Fidelity Mind. And what I've found is, because I was just like ripping into this thing this morning, like really hardcore intellectualism, and I came out of that and I was thinking like, man, I've got about 1,000 hours of work into this book now. But like saying that out loud sounds kind of like, I don't know, inflationary ego, or I'm trying to make bold claims, or like I'm trying to title myself as I worked so hard. And that just didn't really sit well with me, even though I know I work freaking hard. And I know it's like 1,000 hours is no joke. But it felt like, I don't know, lame. It felt like weak sauce. It felt like a claim that I don't deserve to make. But how I positioned the post, because I feel like it's really true, is I'm not sure how many hours I've got in this thing. Maybe it's 1,000, but for sure, I've got tens of thousands of hours poured into me, like from my friends, from my mentors, from my influences in my life, from Seb, from you guys. Like all throughout my life, that book is a result of tens of thousands of hours of people who I've come to meet in all of the outside of the box rooms that I've stepped into. And so I feel like the book that we are writing wouldn't exist if I hadn't have pursued outside of the box rooms as much as I have. Now, I don't want to like just dangle that out there like that's my central theme of this book, because it isn't. Like, that is a part of the book. And as Seb and I have talked about, which maybe we haven't talked about enough publicly, is like I felt like I was driven to create that book. I felt like I was inspired. I felt like it was a higher calling. And I don't want to really like dive into that in this particular podcast, but I felt like there's a hand on my shoulder. And so, when you look at that, when you think about that, who wrote the book? Did I? Did you? Did someone else? I don't know, but that's how I like to think. Because if I don't think like that, if I'm not trying to think broad-minded while also stating that I do think broad-minded because of ... then how can anyone ever understand what that book is about? How can anyone ever understand me if I'm just using a very narrow slice of articulation to state, man, I just wrote the best book in the world ever? Like, how does that help anyone else understand these things don't occur in isolation and they don't occur in just one room?
Seb, you got any thoughts?
Oh man. Yeah, that's a that's a that's a rabbit hole for another episode. But there's so much to that claim, and then there's the inherent, and I'm making an analogy to leadership here. How easy is it to take credit for the things that are occurring, or to seek credit for things that are being done, to prove to everybody how good of a leader you are, which in fact does the complete opposite and makes people distrust you, and especially people that work for you. And so now you have them less effective, less capable, less dedicated, less of everything, only for that temporary gratification or instant gratification of saying, I can take credit for all of this. And we have all done that in various contexts, in various, I've taken credit for the things that I've done in my career. We've spoken about this at great length. Everything has more meaning almost automatically as soon as humility is involved in it. And I mean real humility, not fake humility. I am talking about realizing that we have a propensity for pride, that we have a propensity to take credit for things that we shouldn't take credit for, and that we ought to realize that there is so much more to the realms of this existence than what meets the eye. And for as long as you entrench yourself in thinking that that's not the case, you are going to continue to sort of be a self-licking ice cream cone, that just continues to do the things and melt, but doesn't exactly know where it's coming from. It's like, no, actually, you're doing that, right? And so what I like about what Shaun just said is that book just became 10 times more meaningful. I don't even know if I wrote it. For me, that's like incredible. And then to say, like, all these people that were massive and very, what's the word? Strong contributor to this process and to the material within, makes the material within so much more compelling, that if one person from their high horse has written it, or have never experienced life in a different way, or never been, and there's only so many ways you can be tested, there's only so many ways that you can be. And so everybody having a different set of experiences come together to provide all of this stuff that creates the thought pattern that you use, that you ultimately say, with a measure of accuracy, I can have these conversations because a critical analysis was conducted over 10,000 hours of friends investing in me, which is precisely tying right into what you were talking about earlier, Chance, which is what you were describing, the ability for critical analysis. So everybody is very quick to understand what critical analysis is when you talk about academia or academic process. I'm going to take, this side and that side, and I'm going to read them both, understand both parties, and try to find sort of chinks in the armor of both of these things. But even at the academic level now, we have the biggest divide we've ever had, because even critical analysis academically isn't what it used to be, because emotions have replaced process. And so all this to say that when you take on anything, if it's as big as you are, it'll always only be as big as you are.
Bam. Trev, you got any thoughts?
I don't know how I follow this. Come on, guys.
I'm here to say you. Don't worry.
So for anybody waiting on this book, everybody in this chat room right now is, I would say, has excellent compartmentalization and excellent containment. And if you could see the edges of emotion on Shaun when he was talking about the book there, I think that's just a slight glimpse into the insight of what they're going to be receiving on this. It's powerful. With lines. So going back to the Matrix, there is no spoon, right? The ability to look at a line and say this is a line and start identifying the line, but taking what we've talked about being introspective and analytical and neutral and exploring that, all of a sudden you might realize there is no line. And if we boil this back to, like, let's say the bully situation, and we talk about online bullying. Online bullying is something that happens a lot. You just have to post something up, and sure enough, people are going to want to chime in and tell you why you're wrong or why they know better or whatever it might be based on some tiny little bit of information. I don't know if you guys ever look at welding videos on your social media. I know I see them pop up. You guys might not, but guaranteed there's 1,000 different experts that'll come on. Off their slag, you drag, or if you should push on this, you're not getting penetration on that weld. And sorry about that. And there's an account that's popped up where an individual is learning to weld based off of the comments that he receives on social media. So he goes in and he does a weld, and everyone's like, that sucks. You should go slower. You got to pump your amperage up. You got to do. And they got all these. So the next day, he's like, day 2 of learning to weld from your comments. And he's getting really good at what he's doing. So what did he do? He didn't draw a line and say, I'm not going to accept these bullying. I'm not going to block these people. He completely removed that line and says, how can I succeed and be able to use this? But it also shines a spotlight on all the haters out there and like, hey, maybe there's a different way that we can approach this. Maybe there's some positive encouragement that we can provide. So I think that's kind of interesting. If we can look at our lines, how do we win? How do we remove that line completely, or maybe put ourselves in a different box, different beach, different room?
So I got 2 questions on this because I think this is a really interesting way to look at it. First off, if we're going to move from box to box, if we're going from, if I'm in this box and I'm like, I want to learn more about, we had this whole conversation on the philosopher and the mob years ago now. And what's the space in between? Like, what is that? Is that the liminal space of making a decision between moving from A to B? Or is it an actual neutral place, kind of like I was talking about earlier with defense? Is that something that, do we get up on a line and then we can see both boxes? Or is there actual space to move in between these boxes? Is there areas in life that aren't in a box at all? Because this is a whole nother side of it. And I think a lot of it, the issue that we're talking about right now in terms of societal or the academic realm or our culture wars and all these things that are going on right now, is that so many people are trying to not be wrong versus actually seeking what is right. Right? I have what I know is right, and I'm just not going to be wrong now, versus more information to get a better view holistically rather than a singularly. But I do want to ask you guys, what do you think? What is that space in between the boxes? Is it just a line, or is there room? What are you guys' thoughts on that? And I'm going to hit Seb first because he's got a smile on his face. So what do you got?
I don't know why I'm smiling. It's just a good convo, but and I'm grateful for having breath in my lungs and do it. I don't know what it looks like. I really don't. I think that something that came to mind when you said this was, why do we have, and again, this is, in my opinion, pride driven, even if it's very surreptitious. Why do we have the propensity to preemptively a sign of a certain level of agreement or disagreement or anything in seeking information? And so my thing is why do we as humans jump on bandwagons so quickly, knowing that we are being tossed around left, right, and center, whether it's nefarious or it's by process or it's for clicks or it's for money or whatever the case may be. I don't even care. I don't even want to have that conversation. There's multiple reasons why it's happening. But if I preemptively disagree and I go into a room with a person, and I like the concept we were talking about earlier, provided that the conversation actually works, because you can agree to be in a room for self-promotion reasons, or for prideful reasons, or to impose your point reasons, and all of those are not nearly don't warrant the same amount of attaboys for going in that room, because you went in that room to impose your will and get clicks, get views, get whatever. And it's self-promotion, right? And if that's what motivates the person going in that room, or if that's what motivates the person, sort of or getting out of their box to go to somebody else's, then it's a moot point here. You're just weaponizing the things that are creating the issue to begin with. And so I don't know. That's sort of, for me, it's kind of here's another very, very simple application of the very same principle. If you have somebody in your life that's extremely explosive, extremely, like every time that something happens, it's like boom, a hand grenade going off and everything, having the simple thought and self-regulation capabilities of thinking, I will get mad. It's not like I won't get mad. I will get mad, but before I let whoever's on the other side of this know that I'm mad, I'm going to conduct some fact finding, So I know that I have a propensity for temperamental response or for explosive response. And generally, it never works out for me. And if you think it does, that's because you've never tried the alternative. Because once you do, you will go backwards. That's like a freaking toxic relationship, While you're in it, you're all good. 10 years later, you're like, I don't even know how to survive this. Well, it's exactly it. Once you realize what happens, once you get the ability to self-regulate, that you can engage in processes in a way that's much more sensible, you will see that you will gain so much more out of the way that you're conducting business now. So that calls for self-regulation and taking the time to actually fact find before jumping the guns and 90% of those issues. Because really, think about it, the catastrophic issues that you are dealing with on the daily, well, first of all, you're not dealing with catastrophic issues on the daily, but the catastrophic issues you are dealing with through life are very few and far in between. Most of them are not at all, right? And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm all over the place, but that's sort of what pops up in my head right now.
I dig it. I was just thinking about the fact that it's very, I look back on my life now and I realize how many things I just stood lines on because, and the reasoning behind it was because somebody told me so, right? At the very root of it, with any sort of research done on my part or trying to look it up and actually confirm what that person said. I just was like, yeah, I trust that person. So what they said is what I'm going to stand on. And that is I think that's pretty standard across the world. When you just, especially young people, we don't have any like context, any life to build up to fall back, any experience with those things. We just believe what people tell us and just go, oh yeah, that seems right. Right. Trev, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, I'll be all over the board, but our ability to choose our own actions and our own attitude, really, that's our last greatest freedom. And looking at the situations that present themselves from that analytical perspective allows us to be able to make these choices. But having that hard, fast line that you're absolutely married to, you also have to remember that what you own owns you. And if that's going to be something that will eventually work against you. You're asking about liminal space. There's always liminal space. There's always different ways to look at it. I think it is good to have our lines and to have our heuristics in order to be able to navigate every day so we're not going through analysis paralysis. Having ADHD and lack of foresight is something that I've had to work very, very hard from a young age to be able to say, okay, what's the consequence to this action if I do that? If someone's picking on me in class and I just go straight to throat punch, who's the one who's going to be in trouble? Well, it's going to be me, right? The teacher's always going to see the big guy doing the stuff, not the little ones that are poking in the background here. So if I looked at my line, going back to your son, and I'm getting picked on in this certain way, maybe I have to look at how that line I'm starting to set is going to own me and my thought process and my situation as I move forward. Because so often, as Seb was saying, there is a healthier, better way to be able to approach this or to be able to move your way through. And maybe it's just by taking that step back, saying there's a line, and okay, now I'm going to reframe and we're just going to remove that line like that Instagram welder does. That line of hate is now going to be what's teaching me how to grow.
My doc hit me with this just recently, and I put it in my black and white post. I took some pictures of some horses, and the line she gave me was, "You are the teacher, I am the student," and to look at a lot of things in life through that. And I've been finding that just that line I've only had it for a week, has changed the way in which I engage in the world now, because I'm not seeing things as hate or not seeing things as pain, or I'm just like, okay, you're the teacher, I'm the student. What am I here to learn? Versus I'm going to teach you. I think that's a big line in the sand there. Shaun, you got any thoughts? Where you at?
I do, and I don't know what's got into me today, but I'm all about the drawy McDraw. I'm all of a sudden I'm Picasso.
The artist, I like it.
Right. Okay, so we've got 4 boxes, we've got 3 lines. I could create infinite amount of boxes, and I could create infinite amount of lines. And you'll notice that each box is a bit different. Okay. So now I'm going to take it back to a conversation that Trav and I had way back in the day about the Matrix. You know, you've got the hallway from the Matrix. If you remember the scene, there's the infinite hallway, and the hallway has doors, and you get to self-select your door. And perhaps behind every single door, there's a different circumstance, a different situation. It is a new room for you. As you walk down that hallway towards the door that you're going to self-select, I refer to that in my mind, in my conversations with others. I don't build it out like this, but I just simply call it the liminal space. We've talked about that in the past. I think I referred to another scene in The Matrix, the subway scene, where the subway conductor, the guys can kind of, the toll keeper, the ferryman, as it were, between the various domains within the Matrix. And so, you know, when you're in that, when Neo's in that liminal space, kind of trapped in the subway scene, what do you do with that time? Whether that time is 1 second or several days, that liminal space, that's where you get to, like, think about what's about to occur immediately in front of your nose without any pressure. And so the liminal space is for you. It's more often than not an internal space where you take a microsecond or you take a minute, whatever, up to you, where it's just your time to consider as you're reaching for that doorknob. Now, when you go into any one of these boxes, who shows up? So I'll speak for myself. When I reach for that doorknob and open the door, it's Shaun stepping in. And Shaun steps into every single door as the same person. When I was young, I used to step into rooms with an identity that was designed for that room. I would craft my avatar, if you will, to be able to, I won't say seamlessly interoperate with the room, but I entered as a bit of a chameleon because I wanted to match the room. I wanted to have less friction. I wanted to understand the room. I wanted to kind of hide in the shadows and observe. And so I would morph myself to the room rather than showing up as my identity. Now, you know, many, many years later, many iterations later, many rooms later, now I just reach for the doorknob and step in as Shaun. And I think that's an important concept because out of all of the mistakes I've made, all of the failures of rooms that I've been in, it has taught me that if I show up as my identity, I have a better success in the room for me and for everyone else involved. If I'm constantly shifting my identity, if I'm a different person in the doctor's office than I am in the bike shop, than I am anywhere in my life, then who am I? Do I even know myself? And so now I've got a fractured identity. Now I've got multiple personalities. How do I respond in each room differently? Then how do I react in a room I've never been in before? Do I develop a new identity for that room? And you can see the problem. So my opinion is this. I think you have to kind of go through those phases where maybe you don't have any liminal space. Like you just don't even know what that means to you. And you just reach for a doorknob, you step in, and you try to be the room, and you're going to botch it. And you're going to learn a lesson. And hopefully the lesson helps you iterate it and refine it until you begin to understand your cognitive signature, until you begin to understand your identity. And then, once you understand who you are in every single room that you step into, now you can draw a line in the sand. And that line in the sand is your identity, not your multiple split personalities for all the rooms in the world.
Seb, what do you got?
Sorry, I got to jump on this one because I think bringing a bit of a nuance is important here, because what Shaun just said is extremely powerful. But it's also, if you take it at face value and you don't give it any deeper thoughts, you could think that you have to be, that it's impossible for you to be in different groups, different people acting differently. And so imagine just thinking about going into the hockey room and being in an old folks home. Like if you're the same guy, in actuality, you so fundamentally, this is your line in the sand. I am the same person. I will be very authentic and I will be faithful to that. But how I choose to produce myself in context can match the context. Like you can't just be your all, everything to everybody. But the point is, I think if you have, first of all, if your identity is crafted through multiple realms, lots of dimensions, there's a lot of layers to you and everything, you can find a way to connect with human beings in any settings. You can. It's not impossible. And being the same person in every room isn't necessarily going to work. But what needs to be the same in every room is the fundamental who. Like, this is who I am, but how I choose. So again, it goes back to that mission statement and the mission execution. The mission execution is you going in, having the ability to understand that, okay, I can't be 100% super intense like I do normally because it scares normal people, right? So I'm gonna be a little less intense, and we've all been accused of this at times. I know that for a fact. Yeah, same here. And when I do that, when I soften myself ever so slightly, it has nothing to do with changing who I am. I'm not changing who I am. I'm regulating who I am. And that's a very different piece. I don't pretend to be, or I don't, no, actually, I'm working hard at not being this right now. I am. It's work. But that's self-control, self-regulation. And it needs to happen. You can't just be, everybody is entitled to who I am. Everybody's entitled to get who I am in any settings, because it's going to be very hard to be conflict resoluting or resolving, or to be or to even find common grounds with people that you have very little in common with. But the important piece is your line in the sand is your fundamental being. Once you have that, you can play around and be adaptable. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem becomes when you're doing it, say, as a defense mechanism, you're doing it preemptively so that you don't get judged. And like the list of the reasons why you might be doing that will be endless, and everybody will have their own reasons for doing that. But that's something that you need to be aware of. What am I doing this for? Where is it coming from? And is it fundamentally changing who I am at the core?
What do you got, Shaun?
So thanks for the nuance, Seb. I did slip up on that. I should have been a bit more granular in that. And honestly, thanks. What I'm hearing you say in simplistic terms for myself is what I believe and have believed for a long time, and that is when you step into a room, you're not adjusting your values. You're simply adjusting your intensity. For simple terms, when you step into a room, you're not being unrighteous. You're being your righteous self, except the person that you look to your left or to your right, you modulate your conversation with them so that you can connect with them. That's what I try to do. I try to modulate my, we'll call it outer surface, so that I can interact with the people around me, so that I can connect with them or to them, so that then I can start engaging at a deeper level to my values. And so we kind of, when we're putting our handshake out, there's so many ways to do a handshake. You're kind of setting the tone the moment you make that contact. But the person, if they're not used to it, they're not going to get a good read on your values through the handshake. Or they will. It depends on how many hands they've shook, and it depends on how much time they've spent paying really close attention to that moment. And so values and fundamental core beliefs are what I'm talking about when you step into the room. That should never shift, except through your life over lots of introspection and lots of failures and lots of rooms where you get to refine those things. They don't shift like slippy ice.
You guys are making me think of map templates, being able to having the clear poly with erasable ink and stuff like that, so you don't draw on your maps. Your maps are still the same, but you can layer templates on top of that, which gives you different information. And I love where this is going. Travis, what do you got?
I just like the nuance that Seb and Shaun put on that one statement there, and I like the idea of regulation. It's the same core values, but you're regulating the intensity for the room. But the one that really stuck out to me, and I don't know if I heard it right or misheard it, but I'll say it how I heard it. Not everybody deserves 100% of you. And I think a lot of times people find themselves in situations, and maybe they're in the wrong room. Maybe they're with the wrong people. Maybe they're putting the effort in the place that it's just not being received. Not every question rises to the dignity of a response. Not every person deserves 100% of your time and attention. I like that.
I take it as well. I'm gonna steal it, and I'm gonna make it like the quote to put in on the social media from the collective. But that's a great line. I'm definitely gonna write. I have it written down here as a timestamp too. It's a good one.
Well, it is, but can we just play with it a little bit, because I feel it to be very true. And like if you carve that in stone, it would stand the test of time. But do you enter into a new relationship with someone by only offering them 80% of you? Or do you offer them 100% of you and realize that, oh man, this guy's a moron and I'm freaking wasting my time and I'm bouncing? Is that how you think? So do you go all in until you go all out? Do you modulate up and modulate out? How do you guys play it? Just curious.
So I think this is the interesting part, is that as a young man, I look back and I know that it was all in or all out. You either got me or you didn't. And then as I got older, it started to be, you're going to get like 10% of me just to figure out what's going on here. But then it became about control and about protection. And now, to going back to your point earlier, Shaun, is now I kind of like I'm 50-50. I'll give you half of me, and we'll see, and we'll start to play with it as it goes along. So, and I allow it to naturally take shape. I don't try to say I'm going to give you more or less. You're going to get me in the moment, and then it's going to morph on its own. Seb, what do you think?
I don't know what I actually do. I that's a very, very interesting question. I like to think that I go all in, and that I give everybody sort of the same shot. But the reality is, we have limited bandwidth, and we've all been burned so many times. And it's not about being in victimhood or any of that. But I do believe that there is intrinsic value in earning somebody's trust fully, right? Like, and I think that it starts with the little things. It's just a little thing, like, let's meet to talk about this, whatever. We have a connection. Things are good. Sounds like, let's do a little, whatever that looks like, a little project, or a little this, or a little, come spend the weekend, or we're going out for an outing, or we're doing whatever. And as you are sort of building, and this is an interesting piece, because it's almost like I'm promoting conditional love, right? Which I know isn't right, spiritually. But we are now navigating two different things. We're navigating sort of, say in my case, say a spiritual ideal with the reality of the worldly world, and that reality cannot be completely negated because we live it. So you can't. There's a lot of things I wouldn't be doing if we didn't have to. I'll give you an example of this. Resorting to violence, to sort of replying to violence, or returning violence for violence, for example, which is something I've done. Of course, we have all done it at one point in life, and in my service, that was just a matter of fact kind of piece. The reality is, I wish I didn't have to do that. I never want to do that. I hope I never have to use violence ever again on anybody, and that includes weaponizing anger that turns into violence, because it is. And so, but I also realize that this is a utopian thought construct in light of the fact that we live in the worldly world and things are happening that we just cannot do that, or else the ultimate price is going to be paid in whatever catastrophic way that is. And so I know I'm making a big convoluted thing here, but it's almost like I know what should happen, but I understand why it does not. I think what's important is to realize that at some point, a commitment, one way or another, has to be made. So you either take a chance and you have the potential to get burned, you always will. But you have the potential to burn yourself preemptively long before you're going to get burned by somebody else. And so you have to be very careful that your protection mechanism isn't actually causing more harm than good. And I've spoken about this before. And I had a great case study on this, which was my wife, Alex, and I will bring her into this equation yet again. Alex and I were having incredible conversation on the farm, walking around, and we discussed our philosophy. My thing throughout my entire life was this: I never got disappointed with anything because I never bagged anything, ever. I just didn't. It didn't matter what it was. I'll close from completion. I'll close from realization. I'll close from manifestation. I never let it enter my mind until it was done. So that way, I never was disappointed if it didn't happen. Inversely, I would go out and impose my hurt and my unhealed, defense mechanism on people all over the place as a self-protection mean. And so what that did is it imparted violence upon others, not in a physical way, but just spiritually and by way of my presence, physical presence. And I thought that was protecting me against some of the affronts or some of the, potential violence or potential judgment or potential all of those things. My wife was the complete opposite. She just loved hard on everybody. And she didn't care. And she knew, like, yeah, I'm going to get completely destroyed in this process. Absolutely. I'm all in. And I was like, this cannot be right. Like, you can't have, like, how did you survive that long? So it took me a couple of years to realize that the way that people reacted to her was completely different from the way that people reacted to me. And a lot of the things I was protecting against, I was causing through projection. Whereas doing what she did, she did run the risk of having her heart broken, and she did have her heart broken from people and be disappointed, because we are dealing with humans and we're all humans and we have disappointed others as well. It's not like it's a one-way street. But the fact is, the way that she addressed life brought her more love than anybody I've ever seen. So now let me get this straight. You're going all out and you're loving on all these people, and the people are coming back to you with the same thing. And occasionally you get burnt, versus I'm going to be very, very careful with this. And I'm going to project this, whatever it is that I'm doing, and I'm getting more or less of it than she was. Right. So this goes back to the earlier thing of, what is the risk here, and what is the risk of creating the very situation that I'm trying to avoid by doing a certain thing? And so I am not suggesting do not take your time and learn to trust people over time and all this stuff, but I am suggesting that we need balance. Like, we can't just be set in our ways of, I give 30% to people, and if I'm disappointed in the first 4 or 5, sort of tests, quote unquote, I'm moving on, kind of deal. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but that was a big realization for me.
I'm tracking. That's a great point. Travis, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, the question was, do you reserve? I titrate 100%. I titrate. If I'm meeting somebody new, I'm going to give them a certain amount of me, unless it's a situation where it's like I could care less whether this person gets me or not. Here you go, 100%. And if they're on, great. They're not, fair enough. But if it's a friend of a friend, somebody being introduced, whatever it might be, I probably, based on what's already been said, being hurt so many times, you set up defense mechanisms and you try and protect yourself. And so you titrate how that comes out, and you get a read for what the person's like, and do they deserve my energy or not? And it's just a person who gets 100% of me or 10% or nothing. So yeah, I titrate. It's interesting what Seb's talking about, the unconditional love and maybe advocating against it. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I might have to tune into the other episodes where you guys have talked about that one, but that's definitely something that is, aside from my children, something that's earned from people, based on trust and yeah. So maybe I have some learning to do in that respect.
Perhaps. And this is the beautiful part, is that, especially in rooms like this, is that we can actually sit down and hear these different opinions right off the bat, right? Like, any one of us could be like, no, I don't agree with that. I'm gonna take it my way, and I'm gonna do my life my way. But I think the fact that we have this room here, and the fact that we have the 4 of us open enough to be able to sit and really listen to not only what Seb was saying, but Travis saying, what Shaun is saying, asking these questions of ourselves as we're giving answers to it, because I've been asking myself the separation between giving love versus giving authenticity, and whether those are the same or different. Because I can authentically give someone 50% of my my energy, right? I can be authentic and present in that moment, and I can still they can either not earn that, not earn 100%, or they could earn 100%, but the actions thereupon, we have no understanding. So like, someone could fail the test, for lack of a better term, and then turns out that their interaction with my life would have changed it than what I had previously thought ahead of time, right? So there's lots to play in here, and I love it. Shaun, what are you thinking?
I'm going to try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and I'll keep it pretty brief. So first things first, we're talking about rooms, and get in the right rooms. Now, the question that I asked you guys, that I proposed, that question never existed in my head until about a minute before I asked it. I've never thought that before. I've never thought of that question before. I've never put that to anyone before. And so, if not for you guys and this conversation, that question would never be asked by me. I've never asked it of myself. And so, that's a thought. My second thought is this, that irrespective of, and I say irrespective, I use that word cautionary, but I'm trying to make a point. Irrespective of whatever decisions you've made in your life up to this point, and irrespective of however you choose to run your program in the future, I will say this, that you can run your life through logic. You can be extremely observant. You can logically slice and dice that moment up into 1,000 pieces and analyze it and come up with your theories and your protocols and your, this is what I'm going to do next. That's all good. Nothing wrong with that. But you can also do another thing simultaneously, because they're not mutually exclusive. And I feel that this one will favorably pay you back more decades from now. So as you're in that moment and you're using, we'll say, your logic, what you can do simultaneously is consider the vibe. Get a read on the energy energeticness of things. Get a read on the invisible things. Don't focus on the words, or just focus on the sentences, or just focus on how they're standing. Don't just focus on those things, your normal things that you focus on. Focus on something a little bit more soulful, something a little bit more, what am I feeling? And I'm not talking about, do I feel angry? Do I feel sad? Am I mad? Wait till this guy finishes his sentence, I'm just going to give him my emotions. I'm not talking about emotions. I'm talking about connecting with the person. Maybe trying to feel their soul, as weird as that sounds. Get their vibe. The moment that you can get more vibe and start building off vibes, you need to consider the logic and the vibe simultaneously. And if you read the logic wrong, you might have read the vibe wrong. But you might have read the vibe right. And so you kind of need to study the two. And they act as a feedback loop. So the more you do one well and the other well, they will start to synergize. They will connect at the hip, and you can start using them as years from now, perhaps, where they're just normal to you. As you're listening to words, you're feeling the person. Why would you give one of those away? Why would you give an entire data stream of soulfulness? Why would you give that up? And so, when I am interacting with someone for the first time, the millionth time, when they come up on me, I will make my decision based on vibe, not logic. When I was young, I used to make it on logic and then vibe. But I've inverted that now. And the reason I've inverted it is because I have come to trust my read of people, my sense of people, my feel of people. I've come to trust that more than I have come to trust paragraphs coming out of their mouths. And so it's not that I am instantly distrustful of a person. I just prioritize feel over words. I prioritize my sense of a human rather than if they're standing on one leg or not. It doesn't matter to me now, the almost front that someone will put out, because I usually see behind the front. And I can be wrong. When I feel what I feel, it doesn't mean that I'm always right. But my feel is my first position. And then I will use their actions and words and their paragraphs to shore up as to whether that vibe is correct or not. And the more you do that, the more you self-correct your feedback loop, the tighter your vibe check will be. Until eventually, your vibe check is your thing. That's just my thought. That's how I deal with it. But that took a frickin' long time for me to learn how to do well. How to do. I'm still trying to do it well.
I was going to just throw this on top of what you're saying, because I think you're dead on. But like you just said, it takes a lot of work. Like work, not, oh yeah, I'll just keep this in the back of my head and try to see if I can play with it at some point. No, it's got to be in your thought process through your engagements. You have to do it actively. You have to be able to look back on yourself in those moments and go, man, did I catch that right? Or I did not catch that right? Or step out of an emotional moment where you did not read it right and reassess. Like there's so much involved in it that it sounds like a great thing. And it is once you can do it, but it takes a lot. It takes a long time and a lot of failures. Seb, I saw you click off. What do you got?
I won't be as long as last time, but I just using the same example as earlier, just to bring it full circle with what Shaun was just talking about. One thing that's also very important, and those things are extremely important. The vibe always plays a massive role. I think that could be broken down into its own episode. But when it comes to what kind of vibe am I projecting, that is important. Like, what is the posture of my heart here? Am I in risk assessment mode, or am I in openness mode, or am I in what is it that's occurring with me? And also, what are some of my shortcomings? I know all my flaws And so if somebody comes up to me, and we've all experienced this, where you meet somebody for the first time, you hate their guts, next thing you know, you're best friends. Why? Well, it's very simple. That person was a mirror to you, and you looked in and you're like, I don't like what I see, right? So see, looking across the room is one thing, but what you do have a pretty good level of influence over is what you are projecting. And so I really think that we need to be a little bit more willful in preparing for what it is that we are doing. I don't think that we do that enough. I think that we just jump into things and kind of wing it. And it's like, oh, I wasn't thinking. So now this guy came at me. So let's take a very, very brief metaphorical application of this on the mats. When I introduce two males that are capable on the mats in jiu-jitsu, I never let them roll right off the hop, ever. I never do that. It's always backfired on me. It always has. Egos immediately flare up unless they're extremely mature, right? And that's generally your much older crowd. But one thing that I will do is have them flow roll. When I have them flow roll, and then I will have them light roll. So my instructions to them are just let the person establish the position that they are trying to impose upon you, right? So now what you have is you've already been in a bad position because that person already exposed your flaw. Essentially, you willfully expose your flaw to that person by letting them take that position where normally you never would, because nobody gets an armbar on me. And I'm using jiu-jitsu as a case study here, but it's no different than anything. Somebody happens, they get in your bubble, they have a certain persona. There's so many complex things interconnected occurring at once that you may not have the time to self-regulate everything that's happening with you. It's just going to happen. And now you're going to have a reaction that may or may not be productive, that may lead into you reading the wrong vibe because you are projecting and you're getting the person to react in a way that now you might be responsible for what it is that you are seeing. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? And so one good way to address that is to really understand that we are no good. We're just not, like we're not, like we're broken. We all struggle with experiences and pain and sadness and grief and all of the things. And once we address the fact that we're all broken vessels that try to make it through this, whatever this is, and now we're face to face with another person that has the exact same set of issues, we're now having the glasses of compassion on. And that in itself lends itself to sending a very different vibe, which in turn elicit a very different vibe.
I love it. You guys are just dropping mics left, right, center. Just this is crazy. Travis, you got any thoughts before we do some final thoughts?
Yeah, I think as a youngster, like things would happen. People would say, aren't you mad about this? This person said this about your mother. This person did this to you, whatever it might be. And I'd say, no, I'm not mad. I had no reference point. I was very dysregulated growing up. And so everything was very analytical. But what it did teach me to do is at an early age, really start reading people, reading micro expressions, reading the vibe, so to speak, and seeing where they're at, to see where I kind of fit in with things. It wasn't until much, much later that I started kind of cluing into, and even now, I still have to remind myself what Seb's saying here. The vibe that we put out is going to have a direct relationship to the vibe that we're getting back. And when you think about it, it's really easy to be able to manipulate your environment in a negative or positive way based on your own vibe that you're putting out. And don't expect that everybody out there is going to be having the same happy-go-lucky vibe that you're putting out, being acutely aware of what's happening there. But we really do have a lot of control over where, it's going back to the lines in the sand, how these lines are going to be drawn based on this vibe that we're putting out, and in turn can read back.
Yeah, bam. Shaun, I can see you got something. What do you got?
I do. I've been actively working on my vibe throughout this entire conversation. And let me explain to you one of my poker tells. And chance you'll have seen it because, we've done a redonkulous amount of podcasts together. Seb will probably see it because, again, Travis, I feel, will have picked up on this, but only if he's been paying close attention. When I am fully immersed in a podcast, and I mean like I am freaking fascinated, like the fate of the planet depends on me fully engaging in this, I get a look that is a little too intense. I will watch the show like, that's my look. That is me 100% in the game. But if someone's not used to that, they'll just see this. And they'll think that I'm angry with them. They'll think that I'm hard. They'll think that I'm like not approachable. They'll write up a little story in their mind that isn't me. Because they're writing up that story based on this. You are freaking fascinating me right now. Keep talking. But they don't understand what's going on inside me. They just see the surface level. They see a mask. They've designed the mask as a title. But the mask that I wear isn't me trying to hide how interested I am. It's me fully displaying how interested I am. And if you don't know that about me, then you'll think something else about me. And so what I have to do in shows like this, where from the get-go I was all about it, is I have to try to smile with my eyes. And it's like a little bit of extra work, you know? As I'm sitting there watching everyone, that's what I'm doing. But inside, what I'm really doing is this. I am hunting it like a hawk. But I have to look like a budgie. And so what we project sometimes, we have to be aware of our pattern. And when I am freaking fascinated, I have to almost put on a disguise so that I don't freak the other person out. So you got to know your tells, but then it's also nice for the people around you to kind of get a sense of your tells over time so that they understand how you work. Now, Chance has studied me more than anyone on podcasts. And so now Chance, after many iterations later, he sees things that very few people get to see in me. Like he knows some of my micro cues. And Seb and I have spent a lot of time together. Seb knows way more about me than Chance does, but I would suggest that Chance actually has a little bit more of an inside scoop on some of my micro cues, just because he's had to study me so long through the lens. And so I just want to throw it out there that, you know, the things that we project as we're talking about should be our authentic self. But the cautionary tale to some degree is that you can only give yourself 100% authentically with the people who get you, perhaps. And for the rest, you've kind of got to just adjust things enough so that you can build that relationship until they get to see your full self.
This is such a good point. And not only do I get the benefit of studying you for so many hours, which at this point is quite a lot, but I have the immediate feedback loop in the green room afterwards. So like I can tell, oh, yeah, there was a point there. He didn't like that. Okay. And then afterwards we'll talk about it and be like, yeah, there was this thing. You said this and I didn't like it. And I'm like, yep, no, I track. And the ability to see those things has helped quite a bit. And yeah.
And to be clear on language, it's not that I will say I didn't like it.
For sure.
We will have a conversation about it. Back in the day, and we've all everyone on this panel has experienced me in the early days of the podcast. And we would go into the green room and I would start barking because I didn't understand how it all worked. I didn't understand how green rooms should work. I didn't understand how podcasting would work. Most of all, what I didn't understand is how to get us to here in 3.5 days. And so I had a velocity in my mind that was just bonkers. And there was no room to spare. And it was just like, let's go. Now I understand, I could have done it way better. Those early green rooms could have been way better. I wouldn't have had to bark as much, at myself even. So my language has changed in the green room. My approach has changed. And to be honest, the green room is its own room. It is its own box. And that box has required hundreds of hours of development. Like, I'm still me when I step into the green room, but then again, I have to put on a little bit of a shift so that I'm not like staring at Chance like, you said what? And so every box, every room, you should be growing in it to some degree.
I could not agree more. This is exactly what we've been talking about. The collective and the green room and the interactions between us and the guests and all these things is a direct example of what we've been talking about this whole time, because we have grown. We started this on receive, and we've been modulating and engaging since the beginning, and to the point that we're all still on receive, and we're like, okay, yeah, sweet, where are we going next? Because we all have the reps. We've all done the time. We've put in the work. We've sat through the green rooms of Shaun barking at everybody. We've sat through the green rooms where we could not stop laughing. We've been through the gambit. We've experienced it all. And we're coming on the other side of it, looking back retrospectively going, yeah, sure, we could have done it better, but I think we did it pretty well, like throughout the process, because we're all still here. Otherwise, if we didn't, we would have been long gone. Like, Shaun could have left early on saying, nope, not for me. This is never going to happen. I could have chosen not to do the podcast. Like,
I'm surprised anyone put up with me. I'm surprised you guys stuck around. My apologies, everyone. My apologies.
Well, it seems to work out pretty well so far. So we are just over 2 hours right now, and I can't thank you guys enough. This has just been awesome. So Seb, Travis, Shaun, thank you. Great conversation. Great. People were in the chats here talking, and we just got so into it, I kind of tuned them out a little bit. So I apologize. There are some comments here I just want to touch on real quick, and then we can do some final thoughts and shut her down for the afternoon. We got Aaron jumped in here earlier, just said, yo, good to see you, buddy. Dylan jumped in here. Good to see you with some cool faces. Dan C says, and once you start that corporation, a whole new set of variables enters into your everyday. I'm really beginning to like semi-retirement. Yeah, no doubt. Retirement's pretty nice. Dan C then carries on. There are also people who have done all the right things, quietly maintain the integrity of their core values to the detriment of their own reputation. Many stories that need to be heard. And that's a great point. Lots of times you put up you draw a line in the sand, and then you got to pay for it. It's just the way it is. He carries on. I've worn many masks in my life, as have we all. Space Plum jumped in there. Is this a bro chat? I'm confused. It's the way bros should chat, I would say. And Dan C, have a great weekend, gentlemen. Play safe. Good to see you, bud. So, any final thoughts? Anything still bubbling in the back of your brain on anything we've talked about across the board? And I'm going to hit Travis first. What do you got?
Yeah, I can say I've enjoyed this bro chat. It's been good. I don't think Shaun, I think it's good that we are cognizant of the vibe that we're putting out. I don't think for 1 second that you're going to have to put on any different vibe in the collective here for people to pick up on. And if you notice, I did pick out a few different things of your vibe that you're putting out. And I think that happens when you're in a room of people who you respect and are respected and who get you, more or less. And I think that's what everyone, the rest of the bros who want to chat, should be looking for, is find people who they can be on a wavelength with, who bring them up to a higher level. And that's exactly what I get here at the collective.
Bam. Love it. Seb, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think Travis and I need to do a little switch. I'm going to give him the front part of my beard to fit in his. He gives me his, and we're good to go. I've been looking at this for 2 hours, trying to stay on topic.
You guys good.
Aside from that, it's almost like picture perfect puzzle pieces right there, Trav. You got to make this happen. All joking aside, great convo, as I expected it would be. Yeah, I have nothing else. I think this is as good as I could have done without overextending my welcome.
I love it. And to your point, I think if you guys just melded into one human being, then you guys would be set. The question is, would it be black or would it be white? That's really the question. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Do you need bro beards to be in a bro chat? Is that the way it's? Was that the confusing part?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'd love to talk to that person. I would have liked to have engaged with that person to see the vibe. Because the vibe I get isn't like super positive on that comment. So I'd just love to see where it goes. That's my read. Am I wrong? Was it like a super positive comment, or was it a challenging comment?
Based on the comment, he's probably gone.
Yeah, it's a bit of a challenging comment. So
Yeah, but I love it.
Yeah.
I felt the friction as soon as I read it. And I want to see where that friction goes. And it's not that I want to take it in a good or bad place. I just love a bit of friction, man. And where's the harm in that? And so, hey, bro, if you're still listening, stick around, drop me a DM. I love this conversation because it is for guys comfortable with in their own skin, comfortable with each other, and comfortable with trying to be of service. And so if this is what it takes, I'm all about it. So thanks, fellas. I learned a lot. Really enjoyed the time.
Yeah, I can't say enough about the four of us. I love when the four of us get together, especially, and I like saving these shows almost for like really good topics or something that like clicks in my head. So I love the fact that Travis, you're able to jump in here last minute because this turned out beautifully. I don't have anything to add. And it's just a fantastic conversation. I guess the only thing I want to reiterate is that for me, what's worked really well in the past little while is in terms of lines is just put yourself on receive, see what happens. And then you can go from there. That way you can always learn, you can build, and you can grow. We'll see y'all next week.
Chimo, Randy.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.